Richard Moore had everything people dream about. A big house that looked like a palace, shiny cars parked in the garage, and hundreds of people working for him. He was one of the richest men in the country, a billionaire who owned a famous technology company. Everyone respected him. Everyone wanted to be like him. But inside, Richard was a lonely man. His life looked perfect from the outside, but his heart was heavy with sadness. Many years ago, Richard had a happy family. His wife, Emily, was gentle and kind, and their little boy, Ethan, was full of energy. They would spend weekends together in the garden, laughing, playing, and enjoying simple moments. Richard loved watching his wife and son more than anything in the world. But one rainy evening changed everything. The family was returning from a birthday party when a speeding truck crashed into their car. The accident was terrible. Emily didn't survive, and Ethan, only 6 years old, was left paralyzed from the waist down. Richard woke up in the hospital to the news that his wife was gone forever, and his son would never walk again. From that day, the light disappeared from his life. He tried to be strong for Ethan, but every time he saw his son lying quietly in his wheelchair, his heart broke all over again. Ethan stopped talking much. He didn't smile or play anymore. He would just stare out of the window for hours, silent and lost in his own world. Richard hired the best doctors, therapists, and nurses money could buy. He even built a special therapy room in his mansion filled with medical equipment. But nothing worked. Ethan remained quiet, and Richard felt helpless. As time passed, Richard buried himself in work. He spent most of his days at his office, attending meetings, signing papers, and talking about business deals worth millions. He told himself that work would keep his mind busy, but no amount of success could fill the emptiness inside him. Every night, when he returned home, the big house felt cold and lifeless. There was no laughter, no warmth, only silence. Maria, the housekeeper, had been working for the Moore family for years. She remembered the days when the house was full of joy and laughter. Now, she watched her employer walk through the halls with tired eyes and a sad face. She felt sorry for him and for Ethan, who rarely came out of his room. Maria tried her best to keep things clean and calm, but she often wished she could do more to help. Richard's mansion was beautiful, but it didn't feel like a home anymore. The walls were covered with paintings, and expensive chandeliers hung from the ceilings, but the air inside was heavy with loneliness. Even the sound of footsteps echoed like a reminder of how empty the house had become. Richard's staff spoke softly when he was around, as if afraid to disturb him. Sometimes, Richard would go into Ethan's room late at night. He would sit beside his sleeping son, hold his small hand, and whisper, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry." Tears would fill his eyes, but he would quickly wipe them away before anyone could see. He felt like he had failed both his wife and his son. There were moments when he thought about selling everything and leaving the city, but he didn't. Somewhere deep down, he still hoped that one day, Ethan would smile again. That hope was the only thing that kept him going. People outside thought Richard was cold and serious because he never smiled or attended parties anymore. But they didn't know the truth. Behind his calm face was a man still mourning the love he lost, and the laughter that once filled his home. He didn't need more money. He needed peace. But he didn't know where to find it. Every morning, Richard's driver would bring him to work in his black car. He would sit silently, looking out the window as the city passed by. Sometimes he saw families walking together, children laughing, and parents holding hands, and his heart would ache. He had all the riches in the world, yet he would have given it all away just to hear Ethan laugh once more. One day, as he stood by his office window, looking out at the garden, he saw Ethan being pushed in his wheelchair by one of the nurses. Ethan's face looked empty, emotionless. Richard turned away, feeling that familiar sting in his chest. He thought, "What kind of father am I if I can't even make my son happy?" At night, he sat alone in his study with a photo of Emily and Ethan on his desk. He would trace his fingers over their faces, remembering how life used to be. Those memories were both his comfort and his pain. They reminded him that once, he had everything that truly mattered, and now he was just a man surrounded by wealth but starving for love. And so, life continued like this, day after day, year after year. Richard woke up, went to work, came home, and sat in silence. He thought nothing could ever change. He didn't know that soon, a small girl, the daughter of his maid, would walk into his life and bring light back into his dark world. He had no idea that the simplest act of kindness, something money could never buy, was about to change everything. For him, for Ethan, and for a little girl who had a heart full of love. Maria had been working in Mr. Richard Moore's mansion for almost 10 years. She was a quiet and honest woman, always wearing a warm smile even when she was tired. She came early every morning, cleaned every room carefully, and made sure the house stayed spotless. Maria never complained, even when the work was hard. She was grateful to have a job that helped her take care of her little daughter, Lily. Maria lived in a small apartment in a poor part of the city. Her husband had left when Lily was just a baby, so she raised her all alone. Life wasn't easy, but Maria always told Lily that hard work and kindness could change everything. Lily grew up watching her mother struggle but never lose hope. She admired her mother and tried to help in small ways, like washing dishes or folding clothes after school. When summer vacation started, Maria faced a problem. Lily's school was closed for 2 months, and there was no one to take care of her during the day. Maria couldn't afford daycare or a babysitter. She worried about leaving her daughter alone at home, but she also couldn't miss work. For days, she tried to think of a solution. One morning, she gathered the courage to speak to Mr. Moore. Her hands trembled slightly as she knocked on the study door. Richard looked up from his papers and asked gently, "Yes, Maria, what is it?" "Sir," she said nervously, "I have a small favor to ask. My daughter's school is closed for summer, and I have no one to look after her. If you don't mind, could she stay here quietly while I work? She won't disturb anyone, I promise." Richard looked at her for a few seconds. He wasn't used to being asked personal favors, but he could see the worry in her eyes and the honesty in her voice. "All right," he said finally. "As long as she stays out of trouble." Maria's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, sir. She's a good girl. You won't even notice her." The next morning, Maria arrived with Lily. The girl was around 10 years old, small and bright-eyed, with her hair tied into 2 neat braids. She looked around the big mansion with wide eyes full of wonder. It was like a dream to her. Shiny floors, tall staircases, and rooms bigger than her entire apartment. At first, Lily stayed close to her mother, quietly sitting in a corner with her storybook while Maria worked. But soon, her curious nature took over. She liked exploring new places and meeting new people. The staff liked her instantly because she was polite and cheerful. She would sometimes follow the gardener and ask questions about the flowers, or she would sit in the kitchen and help the cook peel apples. One afternoon, as Lily wandered near the garden, she noticed a boy sitting alone in a wheelchair. He looked about 12, maybe a little older. His face was pale, and his eyes stared at the ground. He didn't notice her at first. This was Ethan, Mr. Moore's son, the boy everyone in the house spoke about in hushed voices. Lily felt sorry for him. She didn't know the full story, only that he was sick and couldn't walk. Slowly, she walked up to him and said softly, "Hi, I'm Lily. What's your name?" Ethan didn't answer. He just turned his head slightly, surprised that someone was talking to him like that. Most adults spoke to him gently, with pity in their voices, but this girl sounded different, like she wasn't afraid. Lily smiled. "It's okay if you don't want to talk. I'll just sit here." She sat on the grass near him and opened her storybook. After a few minutes, she began reading aloud, pretending she was reading for herself, but really hoping Ethan was listening. Every day after that, Lily found an excuse to be near Ethan. Sometimes she brought him cookies from the kitchen, sometimes she told him funny stories about her school, and sometimes she just sat silently beside him. Ethan slowly began to respond, a small smile one day, a short laugh another. Maria noticed the change too. Her daughter seemed happier, and every evening she talked excitedly about Ethan, my new friend. Maria worried at first that she might be bothering the boy, but when she asked the nurse, she was told. Actually, it's good for him. He smiles more when she's around. Hearing that made Maria's heart warm with pride. Meanwhile, Richard didn't pay much attention at first. He saw the little girl once or twice and didn't think much of it. But the staff started whispering about how Ethan was changing, how he laughed again and seemed more alive. One afternoon, Richard saw it with his own eyes. Lily feeding Ethan a spoon of soup and making silly faces until he laughed so hard that soup almost spilled. Richard froze in the hallway, watching quietly. Something inside him shifted. He realized that this small girl, a maid's daughter, had done something no doctor or therapist had been able to do. Bring joy back into his son's heart. From that day, he began to notice her more often. Her innocent smile, her gentle way of speaking to Ethan, and how naturally she treated him like a normal boy, not a patient. Richard couldn't help but feel touched. He didn't say anything yet, but deep down, he knew this little girl had brought a tiny ray of sunshine into their dark, quiet home. Maria had no idea how much her simple request, to let her daughter stay in the mansion, was about to change their lives. Neither did Lily. She was just being kind, just being herself. But sometimes, it's those small, ordinary acts of kindness that turn into miracles. And this was only the beginning of one such miracle. From that day on, Lily and Ethan began to see each other almost every afternoon. It started very simply. A short hello, a few minutes of sitting together. But slowly, something beautiful began to grow between them. Ethan was a quiet boy who didn't like to talk much. Most of the time, people around him treated him gently, like he was made of glass. The nurses were kind but always spoke in soft, careful voices. They did everything for him, but it was always out of duty, not friendship. No one ever spoke to him like a normal kid anymore. That's why, when Lily came into his life, everything felt different. Lily was not afraid of him. She didn't see his wheelchair or his weak legs. She only saw a boy who looked lonely. She treated him like a friend, not a patient. When she talked to him, she laughed, joked, and made silly faces. At first, Ethan didn't know how to react. He wasn't used to anyone being so natural around him. One day, Lily brought her favorite picture book and said, "You know, I read this book so many times I almost memorized it. But it's better when I read it with someone." Ethan didn't answer, so she opened the book and began reading out loud anyway. Her voice was soft but full of life. She read about brave heroes, magical lands, and happy endings. Ethan listened quietly, pretending he wasn't interested. But deep inside, he was enjoying every word. The next day, she came again. "I brought another story," she said, smiling. Ethan finally spoke, very softly. "You talk too much." Lily giggled. "That's because you talk too little." That was the first time Ethan said anything funny in years. The nurse who was nearby almost dropped her tray in surprise. As days passed, Lily found little ways to make him smile. She brought small things from the kitchen, cookies, apples, or sometimes a piece of cake, and they shared snacks together. She told him about her school, her friends, and even about how she sometimes helped her mother clean. Ethan started to look forward to her visits. He began asking the nurse, "When is Lily coming today?" Richard, who usually stayed busy in his office, started hearing laughter from the garden or the living room, a sound he hadn't heard in years. Sometimes he would stop his work and listen quietly. Felt strange but wonderful. One afternoon, when Lily was helping Ethan eat his lunch, he suddenly said, "You don't have to help me. I can do it myself." Lily smiled and said, "I know you can, but it's more fun when we do it together." Ethan rolled his eyes, but he didn't stop her. That made Lily laugh again, and soon Ethan laughed too. Maria, Lily's mother, noticed how her daughter talked about Ethan all the time. "Ethan said this. Ethan laughed today. Ethan told me his favorite cartoon." Maria was happy that her daughter was so kind-hearted, but she also reminded her, "Be polite, Lily. Remember, he's your boss's son." Lily nodded. "I know, Mama, but he's also my friend." The truth was, Ethan hadn't had a real friend since the accident. Other kids stopped visiting him after he couldn't walk anymore. He felt left out, forgotten. But Lily didn't care about that. She didn't treat him with pity. She treated him with honesty and laughter. And that was exactly what he needed. One rainy day, they sat near the window watching raindrops race down the glass. "Do you miss going outside to play?" Lily asked. Ethan looked at her for a moment and said, "Every day." She thought for a second, then ran off and came back with a handful of paper boats. "Then let's play right here," she said, setting them in a bowl of water she brought from the kitchen. Ethan couldn't help but smile as the little paper boats floated and bumped into each other. He began to talk more, smile more, and even tease her sometimes. Once, when Lily told a bad joke, he said, "That was terrible." She gasped and pretended to be offended. "You're the worst audience ever." Ethan laughed so hard his nurse came in to check what was happening. Little by little, the house began to change too. The staff noticed the difference. They said the mansion didn't feel so gloomy anymore. There was laughter in the halls, and even Mr. Moore seemed a little lighter. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew it was because of that little girl. One evening, Richard walked past Ethan's room and stopped at the door. Inside, Lily was showing Ethan how to draw a cat. "No, no," she said, laughing. "That looks like a potato with legs." Ethan chuckled, trying again. Richard felt tears in his eyes as he quietly stepped back. He hadn't seen his son laugh like that since Emily died. After Lily went home that day, Ethan said something to his father that made him speechless. "Dad," he said softly, "can Lily come again tomorrow?" Richard nodded slowly, hiding his emotions. That simple question meant everything. It meant Ethan wanted to live again. The bond between Lily and Ethan grew stronger with each passing day. She was like sunlight entering a dark room, warm, gentle, and full of life. She didn't realize it, but she was healing not just Ethan, but also Richard and even her own mother, who smiled more these days just seeing her daughter so happy. Ethan began to believe in himself again. He tried harder in therapy, he laughed more, and he started asking questions about things he wanted to do. The doctors noticed improvement, but they didn't know the real reason behind it. A small girl with a big heart who refused to treat him differently. No one planned it. It just happened naturally. A lonely boy and a kind girl found friendship in the simplest way, through stories, laughter, and shared moments. Neither of them knew it yet, but their friendship was about to change not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. Especially the man who watched them from afar with a heart slowly beginning to heal. One sunny afternoon, Richard sat in his home office, staring at the computer screen but not really reading anything. His mind was tired. The company was doing well, but none of it brought him joy anymore. The mansion was quiet as usual, except for the faint sound of birds from the garden. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. Then, through the large glass window, he saw something that made him stop completely. Down in the garden, near the fountain, Ethan was sitting in his wheelchair. Beside him was a little girl, Maria's daughter, Lily. Richard had seen her before, but today he actually watched. Lily was feeding Ethan a sandwich, piece by piece, and making funny faces to make him laugh. Ethan was laughing so hard that he almost dropped his drink. For a moment, Richard couldn't believe what he was seeing. His son, who had not smiled in years, was laughing like a normal child. The sound reached his ears faintly through the open window, and it felt like a forgotten melody. One he hadn't heard since his wife, Emily, was alive. He put down his pen and continued watching quietly. Lily was talking non-stop, her hands moving as she told a story, and Ethan was fully engaged. She gave him a napkin, wiped his chin gently when he spilled something, and teased him like an old friend. There was no fear, no awkwardness, just warmth and laughter. Richard felt something strange in his chest, a mix of happiness and sadness. He smiled without realizing it. Then his eyes filled with tears. All the expensive doctors, nurses, and therapists he had hired couldn't make his son smile. But here was a little girl from a poor family doing it effortlessly, just by being herself. He sat there, unable to move, just watching. He saw how Ethan's eyes sparkled when Lily spoke, how his shoulders relaxed, how his laughter sounded so natural. It was like watching the old Ethan, the boy who used to run around the garden with his mother before the accident. For the first time in years, Richard felt hope. Not the kind of hope that comes from money or medicine, but the kind that comes from love and kindness. Later that day, when Lily and Maria left, Richard went to Ethan's room. His son was sitting by the window, still smiling to himself. Richard sat beside him and asked softly, "You had fun today?" Ethan nodded. "Lily's funny," he said simply. "She tells weird stories." Richard chuckled. "I saw you laughing." Ethan looked surprised. "You were watching?" "Yes," Richard said gently. "And I haven't seen you laugh like that in a long time." Ethan's expression softened. "She treats me like I'm normal, Dad. Like I'm not broken." His voice trembled a little. "I like that." Those words hit Richard's heart. "You're not broken, son?" he whispered, trying not to cry. Ethan didn't reply, but he smiled a little and turned back to the window. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he saw. He remembered Lily's laughter, Ethan's joy, and the way light had returned to his son's face. He sat in his study, staring at a family photo, himself, Emily, and a young, healthy Ethan. A tear rolled down his cheek. For years, he had tried everything money could buy to fix his son's sadness, but it took a little girl with a pure heart to reach him. The next day, Richard asked Maria to come to his office. She walked in nervously, unsure if she had done something wrong. Richard smiled softly and said, "Maria, I wanted to talk to you about your daughter." Maria's face turned pale. "Did Lily do something wrong, sir?" "I told her to behave." No, Richard interrupted quickly. "She did nothing wrong. In fact, she's done something wonderful." Maria looked confused. "Wonderful?" Richard nodded. "I saw her with Ethan yesterday. She was talking to him, feeding him, making him laugh." "Maria, my son hasn't laughed like that in years." Maria's eyes softened. She placed a hand over her chest. "Lily has a kind heart, sir. She doesn't see sickness or sadness. She just sees people." Richard smiled. "I can see that now. You've raised a very special girl." Maria lowered her head humbly. "Thank you, sir. She just likes to make others happy." Richard looked out the window again, remembering the moment in the garden. "She's done more than that," he said quietly. "She's brought happiness back into this house." From that day on, Richard began paying more attention to the two children. He didn't interfere, but he would often pause while walking by the garden or the playroom just to listen. Their laughter filled the halls like music. The mansion, once silent and cold, now felt alive again. Even the staff smiled more, whispering to each other that the young master was finally changing. Sometimes, when Lily thought no one was watching, she would help Ethan move his wheelchair closer to the window or read him funny stories in her cheerful voice. Richard watched quietly from afar, feeling a warmth in his heart that he thought was lost forever. He realized that true kindness doesn't come from wealth. It comes from the heart. This little girl, who had nothing, had given his son the most precious gift of all, happiness. One evening, as Richard stood by the window again, he saw something that brought tears to his eyes. Ethan reached out his hand, and Lily gently held it as they watched the sunset together. It was such a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes: trust, friendship, and love. In that quiet moment, Richard knew he could never repay what this child had given him. But he also knew one thing for sure: he would never forget it. He would find a way to thank her. Not with words, but with something that would truly change her life. He didn't know exactly how yet, but deep inside, he had already made a promise to himself. A promise that would soon turn into a decision. One that would surprise everyone and transform Lily's life forever. That night, after seeing Lily and Ethan together again, Richard couldn't stop thinking about them. He sat in his big, quiet study long after everyone had gone to bed. The soft light from the lamp fell on the papers scattered across his desk, but he wasn't looking at them. His mind was somewhere else, in the garden, watching his son laugh with that little girl. For the first time in years, he felt something move inside him. It wasn't just happiness. It was something deeper. A mix of gratitude, guilt, and hope. He realized how much time he had lost hiding behind his work. He had been so busy running his company and trying to escape his pain that he had forgotten how to live. And worse, he had forgotten how to be a father. He picked up the photo frame sitting beside him. It was an old picture. Emily holding little Ethan, both smiling at the camera. Richard's eyes filled with tears. "Emily," he whispered softly, "you wouldn't believe this. Ethan is smiling again. And it's because of that sweet little girl." His voice broke, and he put the frame back carefully, wiping his eyes. The next morning, Richard watched as Maria arrived for work with Lily. As always, the little girl ran straight to Ethan's room with a bright smile. He could hear her laughter echoing down the hallway, followed by Ethan's giggle. It warmed his heart. He walked into the room quietly and stood near the door. They didn't notice him at first. Lily was showing Ethan a drawing she made. A big sun, 2 stick figures holding hands, and a dog. "That's you and me," she said proudly. Ethan laughed. "Why am I taller than you?" She grinned. "Because you're sitting, silly. You look taller that way." Both laughed, and Richard felt tears well up again. He stepped closer and said softly, "That's a beautiful drawing, Lily." Lily turned around, a little surprised. "Oh, thank you, sir." She stood up quickly, trying to be polite. Ethan smiled at his father. "Dad, look what she drew." Richard took the drawing in his hands and smiled. "It's wonderful," he said warmly. "You're quite the artist, Lily." She blushed and said, "I just like drawing happy things." "Then you've done a perfect job," Richard replied, "because this drawing makes me very happy." After Lily left the room to get a snack, Richard sat beside Ethan. "You seem better lately," he said gently. Ethan nodded. "I am, Dad. I feel normal again." Richard smiled faintly. "That's good to hear." He hesitated for a moment before saying, "You know, I owe that little girl a lot." Ethan tilted his head. "Why?" Richard looked at his son lovingly. "Because she brought you back to life, Ethan. For years, I tried everything to help you. The best doctors, treatments, toys, but nothing worked. And then one day, this small girl walks into our home, and suddenly, you're smiling again. She's done something no one else could." Ethan looked thoughtful. "She's special," he said softly. "She truly is," Richard agreed. That evening, Richard asked Maria to come to his study. She came in nervously, wiping her hands on her apron. "You wanted to see me, sir?" "Yes, Maria. Please sit down." She hesitated but sat carefully on the edge of the chair. Richard smiled kindly. "I just wanted to thank you. Not for your work, though you've always been excellent, but for your daughter." Maria blinked in surprise. "Lily? Did she do something?" "She did something wonderful," Richard said. "She brought light back into this house. My son hasn't been this happy in years, and it's all because of her kindness. You've raised an amazing child, Maria." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir. She just has a big heart. She's always been that way." Richard nodded. "I can see that. You should be proud." "I am, sir," Maria said softly, smiling through her tears. "She always says she just wants people to smile." Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes warm. "Well, she's done that and much more." He paused for a moment, then asked, "Maria, where does Lily go to school?" Maria hesitated. "A small public school nearby, sir. It's not very good, but it's all I can afford." Richard frowned slightly. "She deserves better." Maria looked down. "Yes, sir, but I don't have the means. I just hope she studies hard and builds a better future." Richard was silent for a while. He was thinking deeply. He remembered how Emily always wanted to help children who couldn't afford education. Maybe this was his chance to fulfill that dream. He smiled at Maria. "You've done your part, Maria. From now on, let me help with the rest." Maria looked confused. "I don't understand, sir." "I'd like to pay for Lily's education," Richard said gently. "A good school, proper books, everything she needs. Consider it a small thank you for what she's done for my son, and for me." Maria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sir, I can't accept that. It's too much." Richard shook his head. "It's not too much at all. You've given me something priceless, my son's smile. I can never repay that, but I can try. Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks. God bless you, sir, she whispered. You don't know what this means to us. Richard smiled kindly. I think I do. That night, when he went to check on Ethan, he found his son asleep with the drawing Lily made pinned to the wall beside his bed. Richard stood there quietly, smiling. For the first time in a long time, he felt peace. He realized that happiness didn't come from the things he had lost or the wealth he had gained. It came from kindness, love, and small miracles like this. A little girl's laughter had shown him that even in the darkest places, light could find its way back. As he turned off the light and whispered goodnight to his son, Richard knew one thing for sure. Life had given him a second chance to be the father he once was, and he was not going to waste it again. Days passed, and the mansion that once felt cold and quiet was now full of warmth and laughter. Lily continued visiting Ethan every day while her mother worked, and their friendship grew stronger. Every morning, Ethan waited near the window, watching the clock until Lily arrived. The moment she stepped inside with her bright smile and cheerful good morning, the whole house seemed to come alive. She brought happiness wherever she went. Sometimes she read stories to Ethan, sometimes they watched cartoons together, and sometimes they just talked for hours about everything. From school to dreams to silly jokes. Ethan, who once hated being around people, now couldn't imagine a day without her. Richard watched all of this silently but with great joy. He often stood near the doorway or peeped from his office window just to see them laughing together. Each time, his heart swelled with pride and gratitude. He could see his son healing, not just physically but emotionally. One afternoon, Richard joined them in the living room. Ethan was trying to draw a picture of a dog while Lily guided him. No, Ethan, she laughed. That looks like a cow. Ethan laughed too, shaking his head. You're a terrible teacher. Richard smiled and said, well, it's still better than anything I could draw. Both children looked up, surprised but happy to see him. Ethan grinned. Dad, you should join us. Oh, I think I'd ruin your art, Richard said, chuckling. But maybe I can admire it instead. Lily looked up shyly. Mr. Moore, do you draw? Not at all, Richard admitted with a smile. But I admire good artists like you. Lily's cheeks turned pink. Thank you, sir. As they continued drawing, Richard sat nearby, simply watching them. For years, his house had been full of silence, but now it was full of laughter, chatter, and hope. He realized how much joy one child had brought into their lives. A child who had nothing but a kind heart. That evening, Richard called Maria into his study again. She entered carefully, thinking maybe her daughter had done something wrong. But Richard smiled warmly and said, Relax, Maria. This isn't about trouble. It's about Lily. Maria sighed with relief but looked curious. About Lily, sir? Yes, Richard said, leaning forward slightly. I've been watching her these past few weeks. She's a wonderful child. Polite, kind, and full of light. I've never seen Ethan so happy. Maria's eyes softened. She loves spending time with him, sir. She says Ethan is her best friend. I can see that, Richard said with a smile. And because of her, Ethan is improving. His therapists even said he's trying harder now. He wants to walk again. Tears filled Maria's eyes. That's beautiful to hear, sir. She'll be so happy. Richard nodded thoughtfully. Maria, tell me something. How is Lily doing in school? Maria hesitated. She's very smart, sir. Always top of her class. But the school isn't very good. And money is hard. Sometimes I can't even buy all her books. Richard frowned slightly. She deserves better than that. Maria gave a sad smile. I know, sir, but I do what I can. I tell her education is the key to a better life, even if it's hard now. Richard was quiet for a moment. He looked at Maria with kind eyes and said, You've done more than most parents ever could, but from now on, I'd like to help. Maria blinked in confusion. Help, sir? Yes, Richard said gently. I want to take care of Lily's education, her school fees, books, uniform, everything. I'll enroll her in the best school nearby. And when she's older, I'll pay for her college too. Maria's mouth fell open. She stood up, shocked. Sir, no, I can't let you do that. You've already done so much by letting her stay here. This is too much. Richard smiled kindly. Maria, please. This isn't charity. This is a thank you. Your daughter gave my son his smile back. She gave me a reason to hope again. How could I ever repay that? This is the least I can do. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Her hands trembled as she said, You're a good man, sir. I don't have words. Lily will be so happy. She's always dreamed of going to a big school, but I never thought it could happen. Richard stood and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then let's make that dream come true. The next morning, when Maria told Lily the news, the little girl was speechless. A new school? Really? But Mama, how? Maria smiled through her tears. Mr. Moore wants to help. He said he'll pay for everything, because you made Ethan smile again. Lily's eyes widened, and she shook her head. But I didn't do anything big, Mama. I just talked to him and made him laugh. Maria knelt down and cupped her daughter's face. Sometimes, my love, the smallest things we do can mean the most to someone else. That day, when Lily came to the mansion, she ran to Richard and said shyly, Thank you, sir, but you don't have to do this. I like helping Ethan because he's my friend, not because I want anything. Richard smiled warmly. I know, Lily. That's exactly why I want to do it. You helped my son without expecting anything in return. And that's what makes you special. Ethan, who was listening, smiled at her too. You deserve it, Lily. You're amazing. Lily giggled. Well, I'll study hard then. Maybe one day I'll become someone important. You already are, Richard said softly. You already are. From that day, everything began to change for both families. Lily started attending a good private school where she quickly became one of the top students. Richard made sure she had everything she needed, books, uniforms, even a small laptop for her studies. But more than anything, he treated her like part of the family. Ethan was proud of his friend and often asked her about her new school. She would come after classes and tell him funny stories about her teachers and classmates. Their friendship grew even stronger. The mansion that was once filled with silence now had laughter echoing through every room. And as Richard watched the two children together, one rich, one poor, both pure-hearted, he realized that sometimes life's greatest gifts come from the simplest acts of kindness. He had helped Lily with her future, but in truth, it was she who had saved his years past, and time changed everything, except the bond between Lily and Ethan. What began as a sweet friendship between a maid's daughter and a lonely boy had now grown into something deep and unbreakable. Lily was no longer a little girl running around the mansion with messy hair and a storybook in hand. She had become a confident young woman, graceful and kind, with dreams bigger than ever. She was now studying medicine at one of the best universities in the city, thanks to Mr. Moore's support. From the day he decided to sponsor her education, she had promised herself that she would make him proud, and she never broke that promise. Ethan, too, had changed a lot. After years of therapy, hard work, and Lily's encouragement, he could finally walk short distances with the help of a cane. His doctors called it a miracle, but Ethan always said, It's not a miracle, it's Lily. Even though their lives got busier, Lily still visited the mansion every weekend. She would help Ethan with his physiotherapy, talk about her college life, and share stories about the patients she was learning to care for. Every time she entered the house, it felt like sunshine coming through the windows again. One Saturday afternoon, Lily arrived as usual. She found Ethan sitting in the garden, reading a book. When he saw her, his face lit up with the same smile that once melted the walls around his lonely heart. You're late, he teased. I had to help my professor with a patient, Lily said, dropping her bag on the chair. You know how hospitals are. Always busy. Ethan grinned. You sound like a real doctor already. She smiled proudly. That's the plan. They talked for hours, laughing like old times. Ethan told her about a new business idea he was working on with his father. Richard had slowly started teaching him about the company, preparing him for the future. Ethan had grown into a smart, kind young man, still quiet, but with a strength in his heart that wasn't there before. After a while, Richard came out to join them. His hair had turned gray over the years, but his eyes were warm and proud. He looked at Lily and said, "You've grown into an incredible young woman, Lily. I still remember the little girl who walked into my house holding her mother's hand." Lily smiled warmly. "And I still remember the man who changed my life, sir." Richard chuckled softly. "You say I changed your life, but the truth is, you changed ours first." The three of them sat together, talking and remembering old times. How Lily used to read stories to Ethan, how she made him laugh for the first time in years, how she brought joy back into the mansion. There was a quiet kind of happiness in that moment, the kind that only comes when hearts are full of gratitude. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Ethan and Lily went for a slow walk in the garden. The same garden where they had first met years ago, where a little girl once helped a sad boy smile again. Ethan stopped near the big oak tree, where they used to play with paper boats during rainy days. "Do you remember this spot?" he asked. Lily laughed softly. "Of course I do. This is where you said my jokes were terrible." Ethan chuckled. "They were." "Hey!" she said, pretending to be offended. "They made you laugh." He smiled. "That's true. They still do." There was a short silence. The sky was painted with shades of gold and orange. Ethan looked at her, his eyes gentle but serious. "Lily," he said quietly, "do you ever wonder what life would have been like if you hadn't come here all those years ago?" Lily looked at him thoughtfully. "Sometimes," she said softly. "But then I realize everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. If I hadn't come here, I wouldn't have found a real friend. I wouldn't have found a family." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "You're more than family, Lily. You're the reason I learned to live again." Lily looked away, blinking back tears. "And you're the reason I learned what kindness really means." At that moment, Richard appeared at the garden door, watching them quietly. He felt proud, not because of his wealth or success, but because of the people standing before him. A son who learned to hope again, and a girl who turned her struggles into light for others. Later that night, during dinner, Richard made an announcement. "Ethan, I've decided it's time you start managing one of our smaller companies. It's time you take your first step." Ethan looked surprised. "Are you sure, Dad?" Richard nodded. "You've grown, son. You're ready. And you'll do great things. I know it." Then he turned to Lily. "And you, young lady, you'll soon be Dr. Lily. I can't wait for that day." Lily smiled shyly. "I'll make sure I live up to that title, sir." After dinner, as she prepared to leave, Richard stopped her at the door. "Lily," he said, "you've been a blessing to this house since the day you walked in. No matter where you go, remember, you'll always have a home here." Lily's voice trembled with emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Moore. I'll never forget that." As she walked out into the cool night air, Ethan watched her go from the doorway, leaning slightly on his cane. He smiled, proud, grateful, and full of love. He knew their paths might take them in different directions one day, but nothing could ever erase what they shared. Years had changed everything. Their age, their lives, their dreams, but not their hearts. Lily had come into the mansion as a poor maid's daughter, shy and small, with a heart full of kindness. Now she was walking out as a woman ready to heal the world. Confident, loved, and stronger than ever. Ethan had once been a broken boy trapped in sadness. Now he was standing tall, ready to take on life. And Richard, who once believed money could buy anything, had learned the greatest truth of all. The most precious things in life, love, kindness, and friendship, are priceless. The mansion lights glowed warmly behind them that night, like a symbol of all the love that had grown there. It was no longer just a big, lonely house. It was a home filled with memories, hope, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Years went by, and life moved forward for everyone. The mansion that once felt heavy with silence had become a place full of life, laughter, and memories. Richard had grown older, his hair completely gray now, but his eyes still carried warmth and wisdom. Ethan had become a strong, confident man, walking without his cane most of the time. And Lily, The little maid's daughter who once read fairy tales in that very house had become Dr. Lily Thomas, a respected and beloved doctor at one of the best hospitals in the city. Despite her busy schedule, Lily never forgot where she came from. Every week, she made sure to visit the mansion. It wasn't just a house to her, it was home. She would bring flowers for Richard, who adored her like his own daughter, and spend hours talking to Ethan about work, life, and the old days. One bright Sunday morning, she arrived as usual, wearing a simple white dress and carrying her doctor's bag. As she stepped through the grand door, she could smell the familiar scent of the garden flowers. Richard was sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. When he saw her, his face lit up. "Ah, my favorite doctor has arrived," he said warmly. Lily laughed. "You say that every time, Mr. Moore." "Because it's true every time," he replied with a smile. They talked for a while before Ethan came downstairs. He was taller now, handsome and confident, but his smile was still the same, gentle and kind. "You're late," he teased, just like old times. Lily rolled her eyes playfully. "Doctors are never late. Patients just come too early." They all laughed, the sound filling the house with the same joy it had known for years. As the day went on, they sat in the garden, remembering everything. The first time Lily came to the house, how she helped Ethan laugh again, and how their lives changed because of that one simple act of kindness. Richard leaned back in his chair, watching them both with a proud smile. "You know," he said softly, "I used to believe that money could fix anything, but you two taught me that love and kindness are worth more than all the money in the world." Lily looked at him with teary eyes. "You changed my life, sir. You believed in me when no one else did." Richard shook his head. "No, Lily. You believed in yourself, and that's what changed everything." The afternoon sun painted the garden in shades of gold. The same garden where Lily had once helped a sad little boy smile again now stood as a symbol of how far they had come. Suddenly, Ethan stood up and said, "Lily, I want to show you something." He led her to the other side of the garden, where a new building stood, small, white, and peaceful. Above the entrance was a sign that said the Hope Center. Lily looked at it in surprise. "What is this?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled. "It's a rehabilitation center for children with disabilities, free treatment, therapy, and support. Dad and I built it in your honor." She turned to him, eyes wide with shock. "In my honor? Ethan, I don't understand." He looked at her with a warm smile. "You were the one who gave me hope when I had none. You believed I could smile again, walk again, live again. This place is for children who need the same kind of hope you gave me." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she covered her mouth with her hands. "Oh, Ethan, this is beautiful." He nodded gently. "We're calling it Lily's Hope Center." She couldn't speak. The emotions were too strong. She turned and hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I didn't do anything special. I just cared." Ethan smiled. "That's what made it special." From that day, Lily's Hope Center became a place of healing for hundreds of children. Lily often visited to help and inspire the kids, sharing her story about how kindness and love can change lives. She told them, "You are not weak. You are strong. Never stop believing in yourself." Richard attended the opening ceremony with pride shining in his eyes. He gave a short speech, his voice trembling with emotion. "Years ago, I watched a young girl feed my son with care and kindness. That simple moment changed my life. Today, I see the result of that kindness standing before me. Not just in Lily, but in every child who will walk through these doors. This place is proof that one act of love can create miracles." The audience clapped, some with tears in their eyes. Lily stood beside Ethan, holding his hand, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that evening, when everyone had left, Richard looked at the two young people standing in the garden. "I'm proud of you both," he said softly. "You've turned pain into purpose." Lily smiled. "You gave us the chance to do it." Ethan added, "And you gave us the strength to believe." Richard nodded. "Then maybe we all gave something to each other, and that's what family really means." As night fell, the garden lights flickered on, glowing softly like stars. Lily looked around. The same place where her journey began, where laughter replaced tears, and where broken hearts learned to heal. She thought of her mother, who had passed away peacefully a year before, proud of the woman her daughter had become. Lily knew that if her mother could see her now, she would smile and say, "See? Kindness always finds its way back." Ethan looked at her and said quietly, "You know, Lily, I used to think you came into our lives by accident, but now I think it was fate." She smiled gently. Maybe it was both. They stood side by side, watching the stars twinkle above them. The world had changed, but their bond hadn't. It had only grown stronger with time, built on friendship, love, and the simple belief that even the smallest act of kindness can light up someone's entire world. And so, the story that began with a billionaire, his broken son, and a maid's daughter came full circle, proving that hearts, not money, are what truly make people rich. Lily had once changed their lives without even meaning to. Now, together, they were changing the lives of many others. And as the cool breeze brushed past them, carrying laughter and hope through the night, one truth remained clear: love, kindness, and compassion are the greatest gifts anyone can ever give. Because one small act from a pure heart can truly change a life forever.